There are certain words you never forget. On my son's wedding day, he grabbed the microphone and said for everyone to hear, "My dad's only here for the free food." 250 people laughed. Only I knew I was paying for every bite of that party. My name is Mario Oliveira. I'm 69 years old, and I work as a retired accountant here in Miami, Florida. I spent my entire life balancing numbers, helping companies stay afloat while saving every penny I could. I was always one to save, to plan. My wife, God rest her soul, used to say my eyes were bigger than my stomach when it came to savings. She passed away 8 years ago. Cancer took her quickly, but left me with our only son, Lucas. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and subscribe to Grandpa's Voice. Leave in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is when you're watching. We have a new story every day here on this channel. And look, this is a story that hurts to tell, but maybe it'll serve as a lesson for many people out there. I worked 43 years straight without missing a day, started as an office assistant, then became an accounting technician, and finally, an accountant with my own firm. I built a decent life, a good house near the beach, and accumulated reasonable wealth, always with the same goal, to give my son what I never had. Private college, study abroad, a brand new car when he graduated, and he never had to work while studying, unlike me, who shined shoes since I was 12 years old. Lucas grew up accustomed to having everything handed to him. Maybe that was my mistake, but what father doesn't want to see his son happy? When he met Amanda, I thought he'd finally settle down. Beautiful girl, good family. I was wrong. What I didn't know was that the humiliation I was about to face would change everything, not just their wedding, but my entire life. Want to know how a father cancelled his own son's wedding in the middle of the party, and how this became the most talked about story in Miami? Then keep listening. I was born in rural Georgia, in a little town called Plainville, where my father had a small farm. Life was hard, but honest. I remember waking up with the roosters, helping on the farm before school, and still having to repeat the year twice because I was too exhausted to study after work. My father, a rigid countryman, always said, "Education is the only inheritance no one can take away." And thinking about that at 17, I packed a cardboard suitcase and went to try my luck in Miami. I started washing dishes at a downtown restaurant, then got a job as an office boy at an accounting firm. I slept in a small room in a boarding house and studied at night. The owner of the firm, Mr. Henderson, saw I had a knack for numbers and encouraged me. "Mario, you've got a good head on your shoulders. Go study accounting." And so I did. Worked during the day, studied at night, and gradually climbed up. Accounting technician, then college, and finally opened my own firm on Brickell Avenue in the upscale part of the city. It was at my office that I met Cecilia, Lucas's mother. She was a secretary for one of my clients, a beautiful woman with black hair and green eyes like two emeralds. We married in 1980 in a simple ceremony. I was 24, she was 22. We saved every penny for 5 years to buy our condo in Coral Gables, 6 blocks from the beach. Nothing fell from the sky for us. Lucas was born in 1987, complicated birth. Cecilia almost left us, but God wanted her to stay with us a bit longer. From that boy's first cry, I swore he wouldn't go through the hardships I did. He wouldn't work while studying, wouldn't wear patched clothes, wouldn't go without a decent Christmas present, and I kept that promise to the letter. When Lucas was 6, I managed to buy a bigger house with a yard in Coconut Grove. It was a sacrifice, you know. I worked 12, sometimes 14 hours a day, at the office from 7 to 7, then still brought work home. Cecilia complained that I was always absent, but I'd say, "It's all for our boy's future." She understood, poor thing, she always understood. Lucas studied at the best private schools in Miami, field trips, English courses from a young age, a computer when that was still a luxury. When he turned 18, I enrolled him in business administration at the best college in Florida. I bought a small apartment for him to live there, so he wouldn't waste time commuting, all thinking about his future. When he graduated, I got him a job at a client's company. He started as a trainee, soon became a junior manager. I can't say it was on merit, I won't lie. I gave him that little push every father gives when he can. I believed that over time he'd show his own worth. At 26, he met Amanda at a company party. Beautiful girl, traditional Miami family. Father was a businessman in the export industry. At first, I'll admit I was hesitant. Her family had more money than us, even though I was doing well by then. I thought, won't they look down on Lucas? I was wrong, or rather half wrong. Her parents received us well, but there was always that air of superiority, you know? Those conversations about international trips, about the yacht they had at the marina. And I saw Lucas uncomfortable, wanting to show he could keep up too. That's when he started spending beyond his means. Imported car, expensive watches, designer clothes, and I, the old fool, was funding it all behind the scenes without anyone knowing. When they decided to get married after 2 years of dating, Lucas came with the idea of a grand party. Dad, it has to be on par with her family's level, and I, wanting to see my son happy and respected, agreed to pay. What I didn't imagine was that this would be the beginning of the end. The first signs that something was wrong came during the preparations. Lucas never invited me to meetings with the caterer, the decorator, the DJ. When I asked about costs, he'd deflect. Leave it to us, Dad. Amanda knows about this stuff. One day I found a statement for his credit card by accident. It was maxed out. $30,000 in debt. That's when I made a decision. I'd pay for everything for the wedding, but without him knowing. I went straight to Vista Catering, one of the most expensive in Miami, and settled everything with Carlos, the manager. I want to pay for everything, but my son can't know. It's a matter of his pride, I explained. Carlos understood. I signed a contract for $180,000 for a party for 250 guests. Everything top of the line. Premium open bar, international buffet, luxury decorations, famous DJ. Payment would be made at the end of the event, according to a clause I myself suggested. At the time, I thought it was just a silly precaution. The days before the wedding were pure chaos. All of Miami was buzzing with comments about the party at the Vista Mar Ballroom. They even said TV celebrities had been invited. Miami's high society talked about nothing else. Meanwhile, I watched everything from afar, with a mix of pride and apprehension. Lucas walked around like a peacock, showing off his feathers. It's going to be the wedding of the year, he told his friends, never mentioning where the money came from to pay for it all. A week before the big day, I decided to go alone to check the final preparations at the venue. Carlos, the catering manager, received me with that exaggerated respect that only appears when the check is fat. Mr. Mario, rest assured, everything is as agreed. The French champagne is legitimate, Moet and Chandon. Not that domestic sparkling wine some use to fool guests. The flowers are being imported directly from Holland, white tulips, as you requested. The decoration is being personally supervised by Maria Cecilia Freitas, who came especially from New York for this job. He guided me through the ballroom, showing every detail. Tables with Egyptian linen tablecloths, the arrangements that would be placed at each table center, the stage where the band would play. One of the best in the state, according to him. And the food, Mr. Mario. Ah, the food. Our French chef has prepared a special menu. Foie gras appetizer, main course with a choice of filet mignon in port wine sauce or grilled salmon with fine herbs, artisanal Belgian chocolate dessert, everything of the highest standard. I heard all that feeling the weight of responsibility on my shoulders, bent from the years. $180,000 was almost the price of a small condo in Miami, money I'd saved through honest work over decades. Carlos, I said, lowering my voice like someone confessing an embarrassing secret. I want to reinforce something. No one can know that I'm the one paying for this party, especially my son and the bride. The manager adjusted his tie, somewhat uncomfortable. Rest assured, Mr. Mario, the contract has a confidentiality clause. Only the financial director and I are aware, not even the staff knows. As we walked back to the exit, he handed me a folder with the final documents. Here's the signed contract. As we agreed, payment will be made after the event. It's all specified in Clause 22, including conditions for cancellation. I took the folder and carefully placed it in my worn leather bag, the same one I've used for 15 years, an accessory my son considered tacky and always asked me to replace with something more modern. But I liked it. It had history, it had character, something that, unfortunately, my Lucas didn't seem to value. The day before the wedding, I received a call that left me intrigued. It was Amanda's mother. "Mr. Mario, forgive the intrusion. I just called to say thank you." "Thank you for what, Mrs. Regina?" I asked, genuinely confused. "For the condo you bought for them and Lucas's new car. Amanda told me you insisted on giving expensive gifts so they could start their married life comfortably." My heart stopped for an instant. So that was it? Lucas had been bragging about gifts that didn't even exist. "Mrs. Regina," I said, measuring each word, "I think there's been some misunderstanding. Lucas has a good job, earns well. If he bought something for the couple, it was with his own money, not mine." The silence on the other end was deafening. After a few seconds, she responded with an embarrassed voice. "Oh, I see. Sorry for the trouble, Mr. Mario." When we hung up, I sat in the living room armchair for almost an hour, staring at nothing, a bitter feeling growing in my chest. My son, my only son, was lying about money, about me, to impress the bride's family. That night I lay in bed sleepless, thinking about everything I had sacrificed for Lucas. The vacations not taken to pay for private school, the clothes I didn't buy for myself so he could have the best, the house I didn't renovate to pay for his study abroad, and now he was ashamed of me to the point of inventing lies. I decided we'd talk after the wedding. I didn't want to ruin his big day. Saturday dawned with a clear sky, typical of Miami in the fall. The ocean was calm, as if nature itself was conspiring for a perfect day. I put on my new suit, American-made, not Italian like Lucas's, which cost 5 times more and which I had paid for without him knowing. I ran my hand over the lapel, feeling the good quality fabric but without a designer label. It was a good suit, honest like the life I'd led. The church ceremony was moving. The Miami Cathedral was decorated with the same white tulips I'd seen at the ballroom. When Lucas entered alongside Amanda, I felt that pang of pride that only a father understands. That was my boy there, dressed as a groom. Despite everything, it was my kid. In that moment, with the organ playing the wedding march, I forgot all the suspicions. After the ceremony, we proceeded in a procession to the Vista Mar ballroom. The decoration exceeded all expectations. Crystal chandeliers reflected the golden light of the Miami sunset, which entered through the immense windows overlooking the beach. Monumental floral arrangements, impeccably decorated tables, white-gloved waiters, circulating with trays of canapes and champagne glasses. I saw the impressed looks of the guests, the whispered comments. "Wow, what luxury! Must have cost a fortune." "Amanda's family really has money, huh?" I swallowed hard and smiled, keeping to myself the secret that only Carlos and I knew. The party started well, soft ambient music while guests helped themselves to appetizers. Then dinner served with all pomp and circumstance. I saw Lucas circulating among the tables, always with a champagne glass in hand, laughing loudly, accepting congratulations. With each passing hour, I noticed he was drinking more and more. Amanda, on the contrary, maintained her elegance, drinking in moderation and thanking everyone for their presence with a gracious smile. It was after dinner, when the dance floor was already lively, that I noticed Lucas, somewhat stumbling, his face flushed from the alcohol. He approached the DJ, whispered something, and the music stopped. The lights turned to the center of the ballroom, where he grabbed the microphone, a crooked smile on his face. "Attention, everyone. Attention, please." His voice was slightly slurred. "I want to thank all of you for being here on this special day." The guests approached the floor, forming a circle around him. I saw Amanda approach, a tense smile on her face. A special thanks to my in-laws, Regina and Eduardo, who welcomed me like a son and made this dream possible. Amanda's parents waved, smiling and proud. And I want to thank all the friends who are here sharing this moment. He paused, a strange gleam in his eyes that alarmed me. "I want to thank everyone," he continued, giving exaggerated emphasis to the word, "except one person." An awkward silence took over the ballroom. I saw Amanda's smile freeze. The guests looked at each other, confused. That's when Lucas raised his arm, pointing directly at me. "My dad over there!" he exclaimed, and 250 pairs of eyes turned in my direction. The old man only came for the free food. It was like a punch to the stomach. The air fled from my lungs. My heart seemed to have forgotten how to beat. He's poor, Lucas continued, laughing as if he were telling the funniest joke in the world. Look at his suit, people. He didn't even bring a gift for his only son. My vision blurred for an instant. When it cleared, I noticed something that cut me deeper than Lucas's words. People were laughing. Not everyone, of course. Some looked embarrassed at their own feat. Others pretended not to hear. But many, too many, were laughing at the joke. I saw Amanda, my daughter-in-law, cover her mouth with her hand, but her eyes betrayed the contained laughter. I saw her parents exchanging looks of disdain, and in a corner I saw the photographer, clearly uncomfortable, pointing the camera at me, recording my humiliation for posterity. In that moment, something inside me, something built over decades of sacrifice, sleepless nights, tight budgets, all to give Lucas a better life than mine, broke irreparably. It wasn't just the pain of public humiliation. It was the deepest betrayal a son can commit against a father, turning him into an object of ridicule. I stood up slowly, my legs heavy as lead, while Lucas continued his speech, now talking about how he'd achieved everything on his own. I don't owe the old man anything. I walked silently to the back of the ballroom, where Carlos was supervising the team of waiters. "Carlos!" I called with a voice that didn't even seem like mine, so controlled it was. He turned around smiling, but his smile died when he saw my expression. "Yes, Mr. Mario." "Did something happen?" "Cancel the payment." Carlos visibly paled. His hands, which were holding a clipboard, trembled slightly. "Mr. Mario, are you sure I don't understand?" "Cancel it now." "But Mr. Mario, why? The party is perfect." Without saying a word, I opened my tacky bag, took out the folder with the contract and pointed to clause 22. It says here that payment will be made after the complete event. The event still has at least 3 hours to go. I'm exercising my contractual right to cancel. Carlos ran his hand over his face, sweating despite the air conditioning. "Sir, if you cancel now following protocol, we'll have to interrupt all services." "I know. Music, food, drinks, everything immediately." "I know. It'll cause enormous embarrassment for the newlyweds and guests." I looked back at the dance floor, where my son continued talking, provoking more laughter at my expense. "Not bigger than what I just went through." Carlos stared at me for long seconds, as if measuring my determination. Then he slowly nodded. "As you wish, Mr. Mario. I'll communicate with management." As he walked away with his phone in hand, I stood there, watching the party at its peak. The DJ had resumed the music and people were dancing animatedly. Lucas and Amanda were in the center of the floor, spinning happily. He's still laughing, probably at the joke he'd just made about his poor father. I felt a tightness in my heart, a physical pain almost unbearable. Part of me, the part that remembered little Lucas running into my arms after school, or the teenager asking me for advice about his first girlfriend, wanted to go back, cancel the cancellation, let everything continue, swallow the humiliation like I'd swallowed so many things in life. But then I remembered the laughter, 250 people laughing at my simplicity, at my honest work, at my life of sacrifices. Laughing because my son, the center of my existence for almost 4 decades, had presented me as a poor old parasite. It didn't take even 20 minutes. I saw Carlos go up to the DJ's stage, whisper something in his ear. The music stopped abruptly. The dance floor lights went out, and the general ballroom lights came on, bright and impersonal, revealing confused faces. Carlos took the microphone, his professional voice echoing through the sound system. "Ladies and gentlemen, I ask for everyone's attention for a moment." The murmuring decreased, and 250 faces turned to him. "I regret to inform you that there has been a cancellation of payment for this event." A murmur of surprise ran through the ballroom like a wave. According to our company policy, when there's a cancellation, all services are immediately interrupted. I ask for everyone's understanding to leave the premises in the next 15 minutes. For a moment, there was only stunned silence. Then, like a pressure cooker exploding, chaos began. I saw Lucas, the color completely draining from his face, run toward the stage, tearing the microphone from Carlos's hand. "What's happening?" he shouted. his voice choked by alcohol and confusion. "Who cancelled the payment?" Carlos, maintaining the professional composure I'd admired since our first meeting, responded calmly, "Your father cancelled it, Mr. Lucas." I saw my son's face contort in absolute incomprehension. "My father? What are you saying? My father is paying for this?" "Yes, sir. $180,000. Everything." The silence that followed was deafening. I saw Lucas stagger as if he'd taken a punch. His eyes swept the ballroom until they found mine, and what I saw in them, a mixture of shock, shame, and horror, I'll carry to my grave. Beside him, Amanda went so pale I thought she'd faint, which in fact happened seconds later, being caught by her bridesmaids before she hit the floor. Complete confusion set in. Waiters began collecting glasses and plates still full of food. The main lights were turned on, mercilessly revealing the smudged makeup of some ladies, the sweaty faces of the men who'd been dancing. Catering staff emerged from all sides, gently but firmly indicating the exit. I saw Lucas descend from the stage like a zombie and come in my direction. He seemed to have aged 10 years in 2 minutes. His hands were shaking. His eyes were brimming with tears. "Dad, what's happening? Why are you doing this to me?" The pain in his voice almost made me waver. Almost. But then I remembered the pointing finger, the mocking laughter, the pitying looks I received from the guests. "Lucas," I responded with a calm I didn't even know I possessed. "You said in front of 250 people that I came for free food. You said I'm too poor to give a gift. So as the poor man I am, I can't afford to pay for a rich man's party." "Dad, I can't pay for this." "Too bad," I replied, allowing a hint of irony to escape in my voice. "Maybe you should have thought about that before publicly humiliating the only person who was willing to pay." I saw the desperation settle in his eyes when the understanding of what he'd done finally hit him. But it was too late. Irreparable damage had been done, not just to the party, but to our relationship. "Dad, please, I was drunk. I didn't know what I was saying. Alcohol doesn't create thoughts, son. It just removes the filters that prevent us from expressing them." I looked around at the chaos that was settling in. Confused guests heading to the exits, some indignant, others embarrassed. The bride being fanned by friends, her parents gesticulating furiously with the manager. It was like watching a shipwreck in slow motion. "Lucas," I said, placing a hand on his trembling shoulder, "you're going to find out from now on who your real friends are. And I hope from the bottom of my heart that you learn something from this." I turned to leave, but he grabbed my arm with desperate force. "Dad, don't leave. Help me, please." I looked at that hand, the same little hand I once held to teach the first steps. The same one I shook at his college graduation, proud of the man my son had become, or who I thought he'd become. "Help?" I asked, gently removing his hand from my arm. "I'm poor, remember? You yourself announced that for everyone to hear." And I left, leaving behind not just the ruined party, but a part of my heart that would never be the same again. What followed was true hell on earth for Lucas and Amanda. The guests were practically kicked out of the ballroom, many indignant, others clearly delighting in the scandal. That perverse satisfaction we feel when we witness someone else's misfortune. I saw people taking photos, recording videos, and I knew right then that before midnight the story would be running through all of Miami's social media. The 5-tier cake, a confectionery work of art that cost almost $5,000 alone, was collected by the catering staff before it was even cut. The gifts piled on a special table were retained as partial payment guarantee, house policy in case of default. I saw Amanda's parents, previously so smiling and haughty, now with their faces contorted in fury, screaming at Lucas right there in the ballroom in front of the few remaining guests. "You irresponsible! You liar!" yelled Amanda's father, a well-known businessman in the city, pointing his finger inches from my son's nose. "Do you have any idea of the shame you're causing our family?" Amanda, recovered from fainting but with her makeup completely smudged, creating black trails down her once perfect face, was sobbing in a corner, surrounded by friends who alternated between consoling her and shooting murderous looks at the groom. "How could you do this?" she screamed between sobs. "How could you humiliate your own father, the man who was paying for our wedding?" When most of the guests had already left, I was called to a private room in the back of the ballroom. There were Carlos, Lucas, Amanda, and her parents. The atmosphere was so heavy it seemed difficult to breathe. "Mr. Mario," Carlos began, formal as always, "I completely understand your reasons, and the House respects your contractual right. However, I need to clarify the current financial situation." He opened a folder and began detailing numbers. Up to the moment of cancellation, approximately $90,000 has already been spent. "90,000?" exclaimed Amanda's father, his face turning red as a pepper. "Yes, sir. Food already prepared and partially served, open drinks, staff hired by the hour, personalized decoration that can't be reused, DJ, photographer. All these services have already been provided and need to be paid for." I looked at Lucas, who looked like a man condemned to the gallows, waiting for the trapdoor to open under his feet. His face was ashen, deep dark circles already forming under his red eyes. "And who's going to pay?" I asked, although I already knew the answer. Carlos adjusted his glasses, uncomfortable but professional. "Well, the contract is in your name, but as there was voluntary cancellation by the contractor, legal responsibility passes to the direct beneficiary of the event, which would be me," Lucas interrupted, his voice almost inaudible. "I'll have to pay." "Exactly," Carlos confirmed. "There's a specific clause for this type of situation, precisely to protect the company." The silence that followed was deafening. Lucas looked at me, his eyes pleading for help. "Dad, help me. Please. I don't have a way to pay this." I looked at that man, no longer the boy I raised, but a 38-year-old adult who had chosen to publicly humiliate his own father. "Help," I repeated with a calm that surprised even me. "I'm poor, remember? You yourself announced that to 250 people less than an hour ago." I was drunk. I didn't know what I was saying. "In vino veritas, my son," I responded, citing the old Latin saying. "In wine, the truth." "If you said that, it's because deep down that's what you think of me." Amanda's father, who until then had been observing the scene with growing anger, exploded. "You're going to pay for this, Lucas, even if you have to sell that expensive condo you brag so much about." That's when Amanda, who was sitting in a corner with her crumpled wedding dress, suddenly raised her head. "Wait. What condo? The one you said you bought with your own money? The one you showed me the savings you'd made for the down payment?" A dense, heavy silence took over the room. I saw Lucas close his eyes as if he wanted to disappear from there. "Lucas," Amanda insisted, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and disbelief, "did you buy that condo or not?" That's when I felt compelled to clarify things. Not out of malice, not to sink my son even further, but because that girl, now technically my daughter-in-law, deserved to know what kind of relationship she was entering. "Amanda," I spoke softly, "I paid the down payment on your condo, $60,000, 2 years ago. Lucas said he was paying the monthly mortgage payments, but actually, I'm the one paying them." Amanda's mouth opened in absolute shock. "That? Is that true, Lucas?" He just nodded, defeated, without the courage to look her in the eyes. "What else?" she asked, her voice rising an octave. "What else did you lie about?" I sighed deeply. The damage was already done. Now was the time for complete truth. "The car is also financed by me," I continued. "The BMW he says he bought with a work bonus. The premium health plan you have. The trip to Europe last year that he said was a company award. The kitchen remodel with imported appliances. In total, something around $300,000 in the last 5 years. "Lucas!" Amanda screamed, her face now taken by an expression of horror and betrayal. "Your father has been supporting us all this time?" Lucas, a grown man of almost 40, collapsed in a chair, covering his face with his hands, unable to face the avalanche of truths now burying him. Amanda's parents exchanged looks of absolute disbelief. You lied to all of us?" asked her mother, her voice trembling. "Made believe you were a successful young executive, when in reality you're supported by your father." Amanda's father, an experienced businessman, quickly connected the dots. "Wait, so all the stories about your investments, about your achievements at the company, all lies?" Lucas didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence was confession enough. Carlos, realizing we were in the middle of a family crisis that went far beyond a cancelled party, discreetly headed to the door. "I need a decision about payment by Monday morning or we'll have to take legal action," he said and left, closing the door softly behind him. The room plunged into dense silence, broken only by Amanda's occasional sobs. I looked at my son, that boy I carried in my arms, who I taught to ride a bike, who I read stories to before bed, who I consoled when he lost his first tooth, who I guided through his first heartbreak. He was still my son, my blood, but in that moment he was also a stranger. "Lucas," I spoke, my voice more tired than severe, "you have until Monday to resolve this. I won't pay." "Dad," he raised his tear-filled eyes to me, "it's $90,000. That's a fortune. I don't have that money." I shrugged in a gesture that even to me seemed cruel, but in that moment was just honest. You have a condo valued at $1.2 million. You have a $200,000 car. You have designer watches, Italian suits, investments I myself made in your name when you were younger. You have a way to pay, Lucas. For the first time in your life, you're going to have to face the consequences of your actions. I stood up, feeling the weight of my 69 years on my back and a pain in my chest that had nothing to do with physical health. "But Dad," he tried once more, his voice breaking, "why? Why are you doing this to me?" I looked in his eyes, searching for some trace of the boy I raised, some sign of recognition. "I'm not doing anything to you, son. You did this to yourself when you decided your father was a cause for shame, an object of ridicule, when you chose to publicly humiliate the person who only made sacrifices for you your whole life." I left the room, ignoring Lucas's desperate calls, Amanda's sobs, her parents' stunned looks. As I crossed the now empty ballroom, with staff already dismantling the decorations and collecting the remains of the party that never ended, I felt a strange mix of sadness and liberation, as if a weight I'd been carrying for years, the weight of supporting Lucas's lies and fake life, had finally been lifted from my shoulders. In the following week, the storm had already turned into a hurricane of consequences. Lucas was formally sued by Vista Catering for the unpaid $90,000. He tried to negotiate, proposed installments, begged for time, but the company was unyielding. It wasn't just a financial matter, it was about reputation. The fiasco of the cancelled wedding was already running by word of mouth throughout Miami, and the catering company wanted to resolve the matter quickly and exemplarily. As I'd predicted, Lucas's salary as a junior manager barely covered maintaining the lifestyle he pretended to have. Without my financial support, his house of cards was collapsing. To make matters worse, Amanda filed for annulment just 5 days after the failed ceremony. "I married a liar," she declared to anyone who would listen. He pretended to be rich and successful, when in reality he was supported by the father he humiliated. The blow to Lucas's reputation was devastating. In just 1 week he'd lost his wife, his friends' respect, and was about to lose the material goods he bragged so much about. It was on a Sunday morning, 10 days after the fateful wedding, that my doorbell rang. I opened the door and found Lucas standing on the threshold. I barely recognized him. Unshaven, deep dark circles, wrinkled clothes, disheveled hair, nothing like the meticulously groomed man he insisted on being. "Dad," he said, his voice choked with contained crying. "Forgive me." I stood observing him in silence. Part of me, the father part which never dies, wanted to hug him, say everything would be okay, that I'd pay his debts like I always did. But the other part, the one that still felt the pain of humiliation, the deep betrayal of being the object of ridicule to my own son, kept me firm. "For what exactly, Lucas? For calling me poor in front of 250 people? For lying about who paid for your lifestyle? For being ashamed of your own father?" I was drunk, Dad. It wasn't me talking, it was the alcohol. "In vino veritas," I repeated. "In wine the truth, as the ancient Romans said. Alcohol doesn't create thoughts that don't exist, son. It just removes the filters that normally prevent us from expressing them." He fell to his knees on my porch, tears now flowing freely. "Dad, please, I'm losing everything. The catering company filed to seize the condo. Amanda left me. My friends won't answer my calls. Everyone in Miami is laughing at me. There was something almost poetic in that turnaround. Before, 250 people were laughing at me. Now the whole city was laughing at him. I felt it was time to reveal my final trump card. Not out of malice, not to torture him even more, but so he'd completely understand the extent of what he'd lost with his arrogance and ingratitude. "Lucas," I spoke, keeping my voice calm, "I have $2 million saved." His eyes widened in shock. $2 million that I saved my whole life, invested, earning interest. I was going to give it to you as a gift after the wedding. A start to a life without financial worries for you and Amanda. But poor people don't give gifts, right? The horror of realization spread across his face like an ink stain on white paper. "Dad, please, I didn't know." "Of course you didn't know. Because you were never interested in my life, Lucas. You never asked about my savings, my plans, my dreams. You only cared about what I could give you, never about who I am." "Dad, help me, please, one last time." I shook my head slowly. "The money already has another destination. I signed the donation papers on Friday. $2 million to Miami Cancer Hospital, the same one that cared for your mother in her final days." You donated it all?" "Yes. They're going to build a new treatment wing. There'll be a plaque with my name at the entrance, not with yours." I closed the door softly, leaving him there on his knees, absorbing the impact of those words. It was one of the most difficult moments of my life, but I knew that if I gave in, if I went back to protecting Lucas from the consequences of his actions, I'd just be feeding the monster of arrogance and ingratitude he'd become. The 6 months that followed were a period of profound transformation, both for me and for Lucas. Without my financial safety net, he watched his life crumble piece by piece, like a sandcastle hit by the tide. The condo was indeed seized to pay the debt with the catering company and other creditors who appeared. I discovered he had several maxed-out credit cards and loans he hid from everyone. The divorce came through in record time, facilitated by the fact that the marriage lasted less than a week. He lost his job at the company where he worked. The boss, who'd initially hired him as a favor to me, withdrew support when he learned the whole story. His name went to the credit bureaus, closing doors everywhere. The high society Miami friends disappeared like dew under the hot sun. For a few weeks, he tried to keep up appearances. Then reality caught up with him. He started working 2 jobs to survive: salesman at a cell phone store during the day and waiter at a restaurant at night. He rented a modest studio apartment in a simple neighborhood, sold the BMW and bought a used Honda. In other words, he started living like most Americans live, working hard for their own sustenance, counting pennies at the end of the month, learning the real value of money and effort. As for me, I kept my word. I donated the $2 million to Miami Cancer Hospital, the same one that cared for my Cecilia in her final days. They built a new pediatric treatment wing with a plaque with my name at the entrance, not with Lucas's name, as I'd originally planned for the wedding gift. I retreated to the simple life I always preferred. My modest but comfortable house in Coconut Grove, my books, my small garden in the back where I grow tomatoes and herbs, my domino game with retired friends on Thursday afternoons in Coral Gables. I discovered a peace I didn't know before, the peace of not having to carry the burden of my son's lies, of not needing to pretend I didn't see how much he was ashamed of me. It was on a Wednesday afternoon, almost 4 months after the disastrous wedding, that I ran into Lucas by chance at the neighborhood supermarket. He was pushing a cart with few items: rice, beans, pasta, basic products that make up most Americans' tables. When he saw me, he stopped, hesitant. "Dad." "Lucas." I noticed he'd lost weight. The designer clothes had been replaced by simple pieces. The ostentatious watch was no longer on his wrist. But there was something different in his eyes, a humility that was never there before. "I'm going through a rough time," he admitted, without the pride from before. "Money's not even enough for basics." Without saying a word, I took my wallet from my pocket and handed him a $50 bill. I saw his eyes fill with tears. "Poor helping poor," I commented without malice, just stating a fact. He took the money, murmured an almost inaudible thank you, and left with his head down. In that moment, I felt that an important lesson was being learned, both by him and by me. A lesson about humility, about gratitude, about the true value of things that money can't buy. Today, 2 years after that disastrous wedding, things have changed a lot. I'm 71 years old and have a different perspective on life and what really matters. That donation to the cancer hospital was the best thing I did. The pediatric wing they built with my money has already saved dozens of children. From time to time I go there, bring candy, tell stories to the little ones. Seeing those smiles is worth more than any luxury condo or wedding party. Lucas learned the hard way. Today he drives for Uber through Miami's streets. He lives in a simple apartment in the Northwest Zone, very different from the penthouse he had before. He works hard for the first time in his life. The transformation wasn't instantaneous, of course. In the first months, he still blamed me for everything. Then came anger, depression, and finally, acceptance. 6 months ago, he showed up at my door on a Sunday without warning, without asking for anything. "Dad, I came for coffee if you'll let me." We didn't talk about the past that day. We just had coffee, commented on the weather, about the Miami Dolphins who aren't doing well. It was strange, but it was a start. Now he comes every Sunday. Sometimes he brings bread, a simple cake. Last week he brought a basil plant for my garden. "Saw it on sale and remembered you like it," he said somewhat awkwardly. Yesterday something happened that caught me by surprise. We were sitting on the porch after lunch when he took an envelope from his pocket. "Dad, it's not much, but it's what I can do now." Inside was $500 and a little note. "First installment of everything I owe you, not just money." I returned the money. "Keep it, son. You need it more than I do." He insisted, his eyes brimming. "I need to do this, Dad. For me, not for you." I understood then that it wasn't about money. It was about dignity, about learning to walk on his own feet, even if stumbling. Last week, I saw Lucas around the city. He was dropping off a passenger at the door of an expensive restaurant on the waterfront, the same restaurant where he used to dine before, showing off wealth he didn't have. He saw me leaving the establishment with some friends from my accounting days. Our eyes met. He didn't honk or draw attention. He just lowered his head slightly in a silent greeting and went on his way. Lucas still has a long way ahead. The arrogance of years doesn't dissolve in a few months. But I see in him signs of a different man, rising from the ashes of humiliation. A man who, for the first time, knows the value of work, honesty, and respect. As for me, I learned that a father's love doesn't mean being blind to his children's faults. Sometimes the greatest act of love is allowing them to face the consequences of their choices. It hurts, it breaks your heart, but it's necessary. Miami is a big city, but this kind of story travels. To this day, people comment, "It's the wedding that ended because the son humiliated the father who was paying." It's become almost an urban legend, a case that parents tell their children as a lesson. I don't boast about it. Actually, I'd prefer none of it had happened, that my son had respected me not for the money I had, but for the father I always was. But life rarely follows the script we desire. The condo that was his now belongs to a young family. The imported car, sold long ago, probably drives around with another owner. Amanda remarried a doctor from the city. Sometimes I see her at the beach, she seems happy. And I live my days with simplicity and peace. The same simplicity that was once the subject of ridicule. The same peace that comes from knowing that despite everything, I did what was right. Lucas learned the hard way. Never humiliate who supports you, especially in public. The payment can be cancelled, and with it your life. Those 250 people laughed at me that day. Today the whole city knows the story of the son who lost everything for calling his father poor at the wedding the father himself was paying for. A lesson too expensive that perhaps others will learn without having to pay the same price. Thank you for listening to me until now. If you liked it, leave your like and subscribe to Grandpa's Voice. If you watched until the end, comment down below the word gratitude. And don't forget to check out the other stories here on the channel. Here on the screen are 2 you'll like. A hug from this old man here.